welcome to the Fourth Branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening.
Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the Fourth Branch program. Welcome. Today we have plenty to talk about. We will continue the conversation on race relations in America. More specifically today, we will attack the prison industry. We will also take a look at anti-Semitism, which is a topic that's been raging debates across the country. A lack of leadership in the Republican Party get us to ask the question, who is watching our democracy? We'll talk a little bit about the road to 2020 as more Democrats are joining the rank of those seeking to unseat Donald Trump from the Oval Office. And we will take a look at Fox Network. Is it a propaganda machine? Is it a news organization? Or is it just entertainment? We will debate those and many more as we continue this conversation.
Join me here on the Fourth Branch at 10:30 a.m. every Saturday. And every weekday at 2 p.m. This is the Fourth Branch.
Common sense in a world of chaos.
This program will resume in just a moment.
If you join us for the first time, welcome. War on Blacks is a topic in which we discuss race relations in America. The banner itself is pretty shocking. And since we have begun this program, we have had really quite an earful of individuals who push back and say there is no such thing as war on blacks. Now, we didn't choose War on Blacks as the banner just for sensationalism. As we have been pointing out since the beginning of this program, we use these banners specifically to point to a very important set of facts. There have been casualties, and that's something that happened at war. Now, for those of you who have joined for the first time, let me point out two very important things that you can do in order to help with this particular journey that we have undertaken. One, we suggest that you take a look at the People Branch YouTube channel. Go to the People Branch YouTube channel and follow the steps on the screen, and there you can browse all the videos that are related to this particular topic we are about to discuss. Now you can find those videos under either race relation, institutionalized racism, or and rather War on Blacks. So if you're interested in any other topic, you can look and take a look as well. But if you're simply interested in the race relation, those are the title you should look forward to and take a look at previous video. And while you're there, I would like that you subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to the People Branch YouTube channel, and also follow me on Twitter and on Facebook. This will help us to be able to send you an invite, to send you update, and also to keep you updated on activities that we're having in regards to race relations in America. Now, from the very onset, we have made very clear that War on Blacks is not a discussion about, it's not a discussion to bash whites. It's not a discussion to say that whites are bad. It's not a discussion to simply close the door on what exactly we're trying to do, which is a discussion between blacks and whites. But in order to understand, in order for us to find a solution to a problem that's a plague, I would say, that has been since the existence of the Republic, we have to understand the dynamic, we have to understand the relationship between blacks and whites. Now again, I strongly encourage you to visit the People Branch YouTube channel, because we have already made several videos, I would venture to say maybe 2,000 by now, in regards to this particular topic. And the reason for that is because we took a giant step towards the period of slavery, and during which time we kind of walk our way towards the present time. Well, we're not just there yet, but this is the idea that we left the period of slavery behind. In fact, we left off at the bottom of the Civil War bridge. In other words, we have had a chance to discuss the interaction between blacks and whites. At that time, blacks were just slaves, and we showed the interaction, how those interactions evolve, and we get to a point where we discuss the Civil War, which was really the point where whites on one side say enough is enough, and whites on the other side say we just have to keep slavery around. So Civil War erupted, and many casualties. Per historical record, we calculated that at the very least we had close to 1 million casualties. At least more than 600,000 people were killed, both on the Confederate side and on the Union side, and as far as wounded, and also people who lost their life even beyond those fights. So it was bloody, it was costly, and it was all had to do with the fact that there were two groups of individuals: those who wanted to keep slavery around, and those who want to end the practice of slavery. And things have not changed ever since, because as of date that we're talking about race relation, there are still two major groups in the country. If we take just the whites, we're not even talking about blacks. There are two major groups. There are still millions of whites who are racist and who discriminate, and there are millions of others who are not racist, who do not discriminate. And this is where we come in, because in order to solve a problem, we have to be able to identify the source or the sources of the problem. So who are those who discriminate? Who are those who are helping to put an end to discrimination? And this is the intricate parts of this discussion. It is what makes race relation in America so difficult. Now, we also managed to remove a myth, because it looks like both whites and blacks have tried to use what I call a scapegoat or straw man in order when it comes to discussing race relation. And as long as we keep moving away from the real problem, then we cannot solve the problem, because as I pointed in many examples before, and I used the Ebola case when it was ravaging the world, that the first thing that society had to do is to recognize that there is a problem. Now, Ebola could not possibly be the disease could not possibly be controlled, be contained, unless those who have knowledge, the scientists, the doctors, and so on, get to understand what that disease is about, how someone acquired, how it spread, and so on and so forth. The same principle applies for everything else in life, including what we're talking about, race relation. So first, we understand that there are two groups, two very large groups. One is, well, the same thing that happened during slavery. There were people who were on the wrong side of history, and it wasn't just a small group. It was so many of them that it triggered the Civil War. Today, things are not any different. We still have millions of whites who are racist, who actually practice discrimination as a way of life on a regular basis. And as I just mentioned, we have millions of others who are not, and who are actually helping, just like it was during slavery, that there were whites who actually put their own lives on the line in order to put an end to slavery. So the same scenarios still exist today. Now, the myth that we try to remove from the conversation is this: the problem of racism today, we cannot attribute to the white nationalists, to the white supremacists, the small group. Those are, I call, fringe groups. And the reason for that is because whenever there is a conversation about race relation, whites who feel offended by that very problem that they discriminate, because of that, they tend to be very defensive. So they have to find some place to channel, to show that they have nothing to do with racism, and they point to white supremacists, to white nationalists. And blacks, who too are afraid to actually point fingers to the culprits, try to not talk straight about the problem. So white nationalists, white supremacists are used almost as a scapegoat. This is the problem we have to eliminate. But as I pointed out before, those small groups are not the reason that racism, discrimination are widespread in the United States of America. They are not. They're a very small group, and everywhere we go, whether it's in the government, whether it's organization across the nation that discriminate, they are not run by white nationalists or white supremacists. Now, granted, those small groups, they have a big voice. They like the spotlight, so everybody feels comfortable pointing to them. But they are not the problem. In order to solve race relation in America, we have to recognize this is not where to look, because those people, those white supremacists, those white nationalists, they're really a very small part of the bigger problem in America. Now, if I am hated by a white individual, in other words, if my neighbor next door, or if the person I work with, the person I meet on the train, the person I meet at the supermarket, white, if that individual doesn't like me, it doesn't matter. In fact, I don't have anything against anyone's preferences, because someone may decide they don't like blacks. She doesn't like blacks. Who am I to say that the individual must like blacks? It's a matter of preference. Just like we know that there are some religious organizations that have rules, that have guidelines, and which prevent members of those religious organizations from having anything to do with individuals who are not members of the same cult or organization, which is fine because people should have that kind of freedom. Now, we talk about race relation in a very different way. Now, in order for you to understand where we're coming from, we differentiate between individual who is racist and institutionalized racism. Now, an individual who is racist judges another individual based on external factors only, mostly skin color. The person doesn't have any knowledge of the individual that he or she doesn't like, except that he or she can see that the individual is black. That's how racism works, because it is a behavior, it is the action, or it is a thought that someone, usually a white individual, has towards another individual, black, which is based exclusively on external factors. There is nothing else the individual who is racist towards another individual, there is no other factor that's involved, because the individual walks down the street, meets a person, black, doesn't like black, there is nothing that white individual knows about that black individual, except that, well, can easily see that the person is, well, racist. Now, institutionalized racism, on the other hand, is a system. It is a system which nurtures, which condones, or may even promotes racist behavior, language, and action. And this is what, at the fourth branch, this is what we focus on in order to put an end to eradicate racism in America. The difference between, of course, individual racism and institutionalized racism is the person that I meet on the street who doesn't like black, I meet that person, that encounter is temporary, it's quick, it's short, it's over. There is nothing that that person who doesn't like black can do about me that would change the way that I feel. It doesn't make me sicker, it doesn't make me any less smart, it doesn't make me any less rich, it doesn't do anything to me. So because of that, it just doesn't matter. But institutionalized racism is a problem because it doesn't just impact an individual, it impacts a whole race, and it impacts generations of people. As such, we as a country, we cannot simply turn our eyes the other way, turn our head the other way. We cannot simply shrug it off, because as we discussed, starting from the slavery time to now, since we are at the bottom of the Civil War bridge, we've seen that what it has done. We already talked about the casualty. Close to 1 million people lost their lives. 1 million lives completely changed in a very drastic way because of one simple sentiment that is misplaced. So we cannot just shrug it off. We cannot just ignore it, because institutionalized racism in America is live and it's practiced everywhere, no matter where you go across the country. It used to be a time people used to look towards the South, which is mostly where we had slavery, that you could say that most of the racists, that's where they were at. Not anymore, because with travel, transportation, migration, and so on. Now you have no idea those people who have the racist sentiment, those people who hate black, those people who practice discrimination. There is no way to know that you meet an individual, a white individual, and then you cannot point to that individual as racist or not. Because as I mentioned before, we have millions of whites who are racist and who discriminate, but we have also millions of others who are not racist, who do not discriminate. So we go to the source of the problem, which is institutionalized racism. And as we discuss various aspects of that, we will start seeing exactly where the problem lies, and we can work to remove the problem everywhere we look. Now, what happens to blacks beyond the Civil War? Well, hold that thought. We'll be right back.
Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on Blacks is a topic added to the Fourth Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relation in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we as a society be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you.
We will continue the conversation about war on blacks. We will tackle the history of private prison in the United States. And we will also take a look at anti-Semitism, which is a topic that's been causing a lot of ink the past few weeks. And the debate continues to rage in Washington. You may recall that a few days ago, last week, to be exact, Mrs. Pelosi did introduce a resolution to prevent or to ban the anti-Semitism, to ban Islamophobia and any form of hatred within the body. And that was due almost exclusively to Mrs. Ilhan Omar remarks that were either misconstrued, taken out of context, or what have you. But when we discuss that topic, we will look at it in greater detail, and we will also take a look, as I mentioned earlier, of private prison, which is another aspect as to the war on blacks. Where does it fit within the conversation as far as helping eradicating racism in America? When we come back, we will take a look at who is watching over our democracy. We'll be right back.
Join me here on the fourth branch at 10:30 a.m. every Saturday. And every weekday at 2 p.m. This is the fourth branch.
Common sense in a world of chaos.
This program will resume in just a moment.
If someone were to ask this very simple question, how are we doing? How is the United States of America doing? Now, this is not an easy question to answer, because for those who support Donald Trump, including Republican legislators, this is the best thing that has happened to the country since sliced bread. If you talk to Democrats, well, it is a very different story you will get. Who is right? Now, there is a big difference between politics and deception. As you see on your screen, the politics of deception. And at the bottom it says, beware of pretended patriotism. Here at the fourth branch, we do not associate ourselves with a particular party. We have a very specific objective, goal, is to perfect the union. But in order to do that, we have to remove the biggest obstacle, which is ignorance. It is a very high bar considering what's going on in the country today. I explained to a few people who have expressed their sentiment towards me, towards this particular program. At times I feel maybe I should just give up. Something I consider. However, one thing that's much stronger than me doing that is I always think of the future generations. Now, a lot of individuals, especially today, when we look at the Republican Party as a whole, not just a few people, but the whole Republican Party, including the legislators in Washington, they want instantaneous gratification to the detriment of the country. They don't care what happened to the United States. In fact, we've witnessed that for 2 years. All the Republicans, both in Congress and in the Senate, a few turned their head the other way, few are silent, and worse, some are even involved in helping to destroy the very fabric of our society by collaborating with the executive branch. But if you were to ask any Republican, they would tell you, we are patriot. Words as it is written even in the sacred book of the Bible, words without action are worthless. Anybody can claim to be patriot. Republicans claim they're fiscally conservative. Well, they've been claiming that forever. But if you watch, since every time that Republicans have the lever of government, they prove just the opposite. So there are a lot of claims by the Republicans which they love those labels. And that's one thing I have to give to Republicans. They love labels such as Christian conservative, fiscally conservative, patriot. They love those labels. It seems as if George Washington could anticipate that we would live in a time where you would have exactly this type of situation. And he warned us. He said, beware of pretended patriotism. Now, why is it important to point out the problem that the country is going through now? Is because there is no good politician, so to speak. We can put everything in one basket and say all politicians lie. And we've heard that expression before, over and over. As I discussed before, that there are reasons that someone may not like, may not want to vote Democrat, vice versa. But if you want to compare the two parties, there is one party that's always claiming to be something, but which does just the opposite of what they claim to be. Now, you may not like the Democrat because they never claim to be fiscally conservative, although actions speak louder than words. Let me show you something that you may want to take a look at. This particular chart, I'm not here to talk about that. In fact, this particular chart was created for a very different conversation. But just to give you an idea, Republicans love to talk about being fiscally conservative. Now, if you take a look at this chart, in 2009, Obama took over George W. Bush. Look at where the deficit is. That's according to CBO. CBO happened to be a neutral organization. It doesn't care who is in the Oval Office. Guess what happened? If you're watching very closely, according to CBO, when Obama took over, we were at almost close to 1.5 billion, $1,500 billion deficit. And if you look at, as we going towards into the Obama's administration, if you're watching very closely, you would notice that the red is decreasing. Yes, it's still negative, but it's decreasing. By the time that Obama was handing the Oval Office to Donald Trump, that 2016, look under the 16 range. You notice where it started in 2009? You see where it ended in 2016? Which means Democrats do not claim, do not drum the beat, they're fiscally conservative, and yet they quietly work to reduce the deficit. Now look at 17 and look at where we're at now. Do you see a trend here? Now I bring that up not because that was the conversation, because I'm not here to talk about the deficit, but I wanted to make a point very clear. The difference between politics and deception, I'm going to make that as clear as possible for you. I did take the example, for instance, when Mitch McConnell outwitted the Democrats and prevented them from voting on a nominee judge for the Supreme Court that Obama wanted to place on the Supreme Court. And Mitch McConnell outwitted the Democrats and prevented that from happening. That was politics. Remember when Nancy Pelosi sent a letter to Donald Trump during the shutdown and said, Mr. President, because of the shutdown, we won't be able to ensure your security, and for that reason, we urge you to postpone the State of the Union until the end of the shutdown. We're not here to debate the merit of any of the two examples we just gave you, but we want to make a point. That was politics as well. But when Republicans came to you and say, we're gonna give you a tax cut, and borrowed $1.5 trillion, that was deception. That wasn't politics. And the reason I said it was deception is because they crafted the legislation. Democrats not invited. They crafted the legislation and they knew ahead of time this 1.2 trillion, that's the way that they crafted the legislation. 1.2 trillion will go to large corporation and wealthy individual, and 0.3 will be used to divide among the people in the country. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't something that was surprising. They were the one doing the whole thing. But here's where the deception came. While they were crafting that legislation, they were discussing the detail, whatever those details were. You had members of the Republican Party drumming the beat, going to different networks and saying that we're going to give a tax cut to the people. They knew that wasn't the case. They lied to the constituent. They lied to the country. So they went across all network and say this is good for the people. Now, I already mentioned that the very act of borrowing money at a time when the economy is doing good was already a bad decision. Now, forget that. But the fact that they also deliberately lied to the constituent by saying it's a tax cut for us, when they know that the major portion of the money would be allocated for a large corporation and wealthy individual, that's not politics, that's deception. Because if they were so certain that what they were doing was okay, why lie to us? That's what deception is. But that wasn't the end of it. Not only they lied to us about allocating the money that they were borrowing to give to large corporation, but they also lied some more to us. Because the money, the $40 or the $60 that some individual that I have been talking to say that I don't care if they give most to large corporation, at least I got something. And that's also the other part of the deception. That they did not tell those people or they did not explain to those people this is borrowed money, which means what you currently looking at on your paycheck that you so like you don't care whether they give the bulk to the large corporation. Well, you have to return that, to pay that back along with interest, because it was borrowed money. When you borrow money, you have to pay it back. But that's not even the worst deception. The worst deception is the fact that in the legislation that Republican crafted, although the large corporation and the wealthy individual got most of the money, guess who is supposed to pay the whole thing back? Take a guess. We, the people. We are on the hook to pay the whole thing back. But did they ever tell us that? Of course not. That's what deception is. Not only they pretend to be giving money to the people, they call it tax cut. Now, something that you're giving to someone should not have to pay it back, because that's what a gift's supposed to be. But we know that's not the case because the money was borrowed. But what makes the deception even worse is the fact that we become responsible for the large portion of the money that's given to large corporation and wealthy individual. That's deception. That's not politics. And the reason that Republicans have been able to get away with that in general is because they rely and they've been exploiting the constituent, especially Republican constituent. They are naive, they are gullible, and they are ignorant in every aspect of the word. And Republican legislators, they exploit those type of weaknesses from their constituent because they know, in fact, that what they were saying to the constituent were lies, but they went on places like Fox and they amplified the lie. And what happened? Their constituent simply acted on it. And that's the way Republicans for decades, that's the way that they rally support. Not because they have something to offer. They rally support by lying to their constituent. And what do? They have a propaganda machine by the name of Fox. And what did the propaganda machine do for them? It amplifies the message. And the constituent, up to today, you have a conversation with any Republican, they simply echo what they've been hearing from Fox, what they've been hearing from other echo chamber in the Republican side, things that have no basis, things that are wrong, and they've been living in a complete different world because their legislators exploit their weaknesses. Now, the reason Fox does is not so much for a different reason, but the legislator exploit the ignorance of their constituent because it helps them to keep their job. Fox, on the other hand, exploit the ignorance of its audience because they help to fill their coffers. That's how they get money from advertisers, because the more that they're able to control the audience, they're able to keep its audience, they're able to increase the viewership, the more they can charge to the advertisers. And guess who is the tool for that? The Republican constituent. So they have no reason to educate the Republican constituent. They have no reason for the Republican constituent to become smart. So they continue to peddle misinformation. they continue to misinform its audience, and the Republican legislators continue to enjoy their jobs based exclusively on the fact that they able to exploit the weaknesses in the Republican constituent. Why do we care? Why should we care?
In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies presented to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore.
Why should we care? Why should we care that Republican legislators exploit the weaknesses of their constituent? As it stands today, we have millions of individuals who live in a world that different from reality. Their priorities pretty screwed up. For the past few days, I've been thinking what you would consider genius if it weren't for the wrong reason that the Republican legislators have been doing in regards to the constituent. They use scare tactic, they use fear in order to control, in order to get a grip on their constituent. And besides making certain that the constituents stay dumb, ignorant, because that benefits them, but they also use fear. They scare people away from something, not because they have something else to offer, not because they have something better to offer, but they simply scare people away from something, from someone. In that particular scenario that we're debating here, Republicans, legislators, they scare people away from Democrats' agenda, not because they have something better to offer. For instance, you may recall that during the Obama's tenure, Republicans were beating the drum of when Obama introduced the Health Care Act, Republicans were drumming the beat of the death panel. After dancing to that beat for so long and seem not to move the needle for them, now they say Obamacare is going to kill jobs. And they go down the line. Now, if you see one thing that seems to be constant here, it's the scare tactic. Republicans never had an alternative to Obamacare. Never did. They tried to repeal Obamacare 62 times during Obama's tenure, and during Trump they already tried, what, twice, 3 times? Not because they ever had something better to offer. It's never about that. And that's where the deception is detrimental to the country. This is not politics. Because as much as people can been saying that politics is dirty, maybe they confuse politics with deception, because there is nothing politics about an elected official deceiving the constituent. There's no politics there, because when you lie to the constituent, that's not politics. And there is nothing that one does that doesn't have impact, future impact for the future generation. We may not be able to assess it today because we're not in possession of all information everywhere, but impact there is. And I can give you a good, perfect, great example. When Adolf Hitler was born, if you look at the picture of that baby, it's a very handsome baby. He was a very handsome baby. Who would have thought that handsome baby would grow up to become one of the cruelest iron fist leader in the world? Now, whatever would have happened to that baby would have changed the whole world. The world would have been a very different world. So yes, sometimes we're not able to assess the impact of what we do. But make no mistake, whatever we do in life has far-reaching impact. And it's not just here in the United States. It could be worldwide, and who knows, at some point we may even find out that it's universe-wide. So when you have legislators who deliberately, we're not talking about people who say something that happened to be wrong. We're talking about people who deliberately come to you and lie to you in order to be able to keep his or her job. That's a deception that we should not reward. So the past few days I've been thinking about something that stuck in my mind. I said, what is your priority, Republicans? What is your priority in life? You cannot have, and so far what has been the most irritating aspect of sharing the country with the Republican legislators is not because they make mistakes, because everybody expects people to make mistakes, which is fine. But when you have people in position that have knowledge, that have understanding but deliberately decide to do the wrong things, the question is, what exactly is the priority? Because the past 2 years, during which time that Republicans were in control of all levels of the government, all the Republicans prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the country doesn't seem to matter to them. And the irony of the whole thing is, even after the midterm election, although the constituent, not the Republican constituent, the constituent on the other side, both Democrats and Independent, prove that they did not like what Republicans were doing in terms of balancing our government. We still have the whole Republican Congress and the Senate continue on the wrong path. And they put it in display every chance that they have. So the question is, what is the priority for the Republicans elected official whose job is to protect, is to defend the United States of America, not to defend Donald Trump, not to defend the Republican Party, but the United States of America? What is the priority that Republicans have? But you know what makes the predicament even more sad? In the past, if you have politicians who stray away from what you would call core values, what Republicans consider core values, in the past, you would find that the constituent, the Republican constituent, would get rid of all of them in order to preserve the integrity of the party, in order to safeguard the Constitution, and in order to make certain that any elected official understand that the primary job is to the country, not to an individual. But you know what's even more sad? Is the fact not only the legislators have already trashed the Constitution, ignored the rule of law, and actually working aggressively to destroy the very fabric of our society. What's more sad than that is that the constituents are too gullible, the constituents are too naive, the constituents are too ignorant to do anything about it. And that is a very big problem for the country, because how do you fix it? Is an important problem, because how do you fix this predicament which is dragging the country down a path which will impact generations to come? How do the current Republican constituent justify going along with it? The other day I said Donald Trump must be impeached. A few days later I heard Mrs. Nancy Pelosi make a case to make the idea, or to make the prospect of Donald Trump impeachment much more difficult. I ask the question to myself, who is watching over our democracy? Republicans clearly didn't care. For 2 years, not only they enabled Donald Trump to continue on the path he was, but they actually helped him along the way. Now we have Democrats in control of Congress, but because they're looking at 2020, they too seem to be making calculation that let's not I don't know if you see the problem that the country has. Both parties are making calculation that benefit their party no matter what happened to their country. Now, granted, Democrats are doing some oversight. Now, there is some major differences, so we cannot say that it's completely the same thing, because Republicans were enablers. They enabled Donald Trump, they helped Donald Trump, they assisted Donald Trump. So we cannot really compare the two parties. Now, the Democrats are doing some oversight. But I take issue that what we have been, forget about Mueller's report, because the idea that we ought to wait for Mueller's report is not a good argument, because the President of the United States should be held to high standard. And if we cannot do that, if we cannot show to the world that we value, we see it important for the presidency of the United States to remain that sacred, that very valuable post, then what else is there? Impeaching Donald Trump is not a matter of, do we wait for Mueller's report to find whether Donald Trump has committed high crimes? The office of the presidency has been diminished. Donald Trump has done enough damage as president of the United States for any Congress which values the Constitution, for any individual which values the integrity of our government, of the office of the presidency, to say, no, we cannot allow somebody like that. The amount of scandal surrounding Donald Trump. One mistake that I made for the first time, because I'm usually very correct about the way that I think that our legislators behave. Before the 2018 midterm election, I bet that after the midterm election, I even wrote about that, I published about that after the midterm election, the Republican, even if they gain control or if they keep control of both houses, they will do the right thing. Meaning they will exercise oversight over on the executive branch, and they will take appropriate action. And I strongly believe that was going to be the case. Boy, I was wrong. Because judging by the behavior of the Republicans, who are not even in control of Congress, I have to ask myself the question, what exactly are they doing in Washington? If it's not to defend the Constitution. if it's not to uphold the Constitution, it's not to defend the rule of law, then what exactly are they doing in Washington? What do they think their job is? Once again, I come back to the fact that the Republican constituent, are either too ignorant to take over the party and kick those people out, because they too seem to be okay with what's going on. So they too, who claim to be patriot, claim to be Christian, claim to be fiscally conservative, they too have walked away from what they continue to claim, what they call core values. They love the label, but they all walk away from those values, and as such, Republican legislators continue to capitalize on the ignorance of the Republican constituent. And that is not good for the future of the United States of America.
Ignorance, they say, is the biggest threat to any democracy. Indeed, it is. Plato, a Greek philosopher born in 427 BC, said that ignorance is the root and stem of all evil. Today, members in the Republican Party wear ignorance as a badge of honor, while the rest of the country watch powerless the destruction of a country which was once the envy of the world. The media is the enemy of the country, said Donald Trump. The Democrat legislators are obstructionists for not going along with everything the president wants. The Department of Justice is biased for investigating corruption in the Trump administration. This is the United States of America. Any question? Donald Trump is wrong to call the media the enemy of the people. Throughout history, dictators, authoritarians have always tried to delegitimize the media in order to get away with corruption, scandal, and yes, even abuse. Adolf Hitler did exactly the same thing in 1933, accusing the media of fabrication. Journalists are not in the business of fairness. Our only business is to be objective. It is our duty to hold Trump and every administration accountable. Today, it is urgent. It is necessary. It is critical of our very freedom. It depends on it.
I do thank you for spending the time with me. I hope those information were useful. Should you have any question, comment, criticism, please do not hesitate to send those our way. Should you have a topic you would like us to address right here on the Fourth Branch, please do so. Let us know. We will research it. We will debate it right here on the Fourth Branch. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful afternoon or evening, whichever it happened to be. Good day.
The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.
What if hip-hop never existed? Do you think there'd be as many heads screaming out, stop snitching? What if Adam and Eve ain't eat the fruit? You think we'd be able to see the truth? Or what if Albert Einstein ain't think of the nuke? Or Smith & Wesson ain't teach us to shoot? You think there'd be as many plays out there if there was no boost? Matter of fact, what if white man hung off a noose? Would it still be cool to say nigga? Or maybe we would make six figures? Or would we wanna be crackers? And all the whites would be rappers? What if Martin Luther King survived? You think the New Orleans flood would've caused him to drop and die? I wonder what if and see what is. Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? If Christopher Wallace never got murked, how much money would Sean Carter be worth? What if Tupac never got hit with the flame? Would the game still have change filled with these lames? What if Jabari wasn't speeding down the street? What if the bullet Malcolm sent never hit Zeke? A black guy dropped off at a house instead of a stop? Or Ali never got bopped by the cops? What if the little homie Easy didn't die? Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? I don't know.